Though smaller in scale than splashy tournaments or courtly banquets, these community gatherings fostered a shared identity and relief from daily drudgery. Imagine the buzz of excitement in a sleepy English hamlet as people gathered for the festival of the church's patron saint. The scent of roasting meat wafted on the breeze as an ox was turned on a spit over crackling flames. Lads and lasses flirted and danced around a gay-decorated maple to the tune of a fiddle and drum. Merry wives gossiped and cackled as they strung garlands of wildflowers, while intense youths tested their mettle in archery and wrestling contests. A sense of fellowship flowed along with the barrels of foamy ale the local reeve provided. For one day at least, the grueling cycle of planting and plowing could be forgotten. Even in the humblest villages, a cherished feature of festivals was the mystery plays. These simple dramas reenacted stories from the Bible and the lives of saints and martyrs. In the days before widespread literacy, mystery plays made religious narratives accessible to common people and provided rare opportunities for creative expression. Members of various trade guilds, the butchers, the bakers, the candlestick makers, took responsibility for staging different episodes that matched their craft. The shipbuilders might dramatize Noah's Ark, while the vintners depicted the wedding at Cana, and so on. The plays unfolded on wagons converted into makeshift stages that rolled through town, stopping at predetermined stations to perform each scene. Although the subject matter was sacred, that didn't prevent some unintentionally humorous moments. Since special effects were rather rudimentary, angels made do with chicken feathers glued to white robes, and fiery helmets constructed of red painted paper flapped open to receive the damned. In the famous Second Shepherd's play, a thief trying to hide a stolen lamb from suspicious shepherds attempted to pass it off as a newborn baby. The mistaken identity hijinks must have had audiences in stitches. One can imagine a hard-working peasant gaping in delight as Noah bickered with his mouthy wife, perhaps recognizing his own marital spats. Laughter, even at somewhat sacrilegious humor, provided a healing balm for lives that could often be nasty, brutish, and short. For a few mirth-filled hours, the stern doctrines of the church took a back seat to pure uproarious entertainment. Kings and commoners alike shared in the collective catharsis of carnival frolics, midsummer merriment, and homespun harvest gaiety. So, when your days feel heavy and burdensome, just remember that even in the most trying times, the people of the Middle Ages found ways to celebrate, laugh, and come together in joy. I hope you find in our exploration of history a sense of connection to those who came before us and a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Until next time, dear listener, may your dreams be filled with merriment and your nights with peaceful rest. On those dreary days when your spirits feel heavy, take a moment to remember those tenacious medieval merrymakers. Picture them with candlelit wreaths, sugary sculptures, and perhaps a sweet lamb standing in for the baby Jesus, finding reasons to celebrate amidst the toughest of times. Even the most weary serf and haughty duke cherish their hard-earned holidays. Maybe a touch of that same silliness is just what you need. Grab a carrot for your pillow, invoke the power of St. Michael's love magic, appoint a friend as the Lord of Misrule, and issue some mock edicts. A little festive foolery might be the perfect pick-me-up for a trying day. With that whimsical advice, I bid you good night, fair listener. May your dreams be filled with noble knights and mischievous jesters, merry maples, and mysterious miracle plays. In sleep, just as in laughter, the cares of the world melt away. Until next time, rest you merry one and all. Now, as for the vibrant world of medieval Venice, it is worth noting that the gambling houses were quite a sensation upon their debut. Though the exact details have faded into history, most scholars agree these were among the earliest dedicated gambling parlors in Europe. Venetians, with their love for games and wagers, enthusiastically embraced these new establishments. Imagine yourself strolling through the winding cobblestone streets of Venice, with narrow buildings rising on either side, laundry strung between windows, and the air thick with the brine of the canals and the sizzle of frying seafood. Rounding a corner, you stumble upon an elaborately painted door, the entrance to the Gluck House. The sounds of laughter and clinking goblets emanate from within. As you pass through the doorway, you step into a hazy den of merriment and vice. Gamblers crowd around tables, their faces a tapestry of wins and losses in the flickering candlelight. A trio of minstrels plays a jaunty tune in the corner while servers weave through the throng, carrying trays of wine and plates of antipasti.as. You approach one of the tables. You survey the game in progress. Dice, humorously carved from animal bones, rattle in a shooter's hand, while wooden discs serve as haphazard betting markers. Noblemen and merchants alike cajole each other and curse the dice in colorful Venetian slang. As a new round begins, a hush falls over the gamblers. The shooter blows on the dice for luck and casts them across the table. Cheers erupt as the dice reveal a winning roll. Coins scoop towards the fortunate few while the losers groan. You catch the eye of a grizzled, one-eyed gambler, his face a map of hard living, who shoots you a gap-toothed grin. "Sit down, friend, and test your luck," he rasps, gesturing to an empty chair. Fickle Mistress Fortuna calls, tossing caution to the wind. You slide into the seat and take up the dice. A new player has entered the game at the Gluck House. But alas, we cannot spend all night carousing in this den of chance, enticing as it may be. The scene fades into the shadows as we take our leave, for many other medieval divertissements still beckon us onward. Reflecting on the spirit of those Venetian dice players, we find that the thrill of gambling is very much alive today, even if the games have changed. Thus, we turn from the rattle of dice to the thunder of hoofbeats, as the medieval tournament ground calls for noble knights and enthusiastic common folk alike. Nothing could rival the pageantry and excitement of a grand tournament, a chance for skilled warriors to test their mettle, and for spectators to marvel at displays of martial prowess. One of the most celebrated knights of the tournament circuit was William Marshall, a man who rose from humble origins to become renowned as the greatest knight in Christendom. Marshall, the youngest son of a minor English nobleman, honed his skills in the arts of knighthood, proving to be a quick study in the bruising physicality of mounted combat. Soon, he was traveling the tournament circuit as a roving knight-errant, making a name for himself with his victories. Imagine the scene as Marshall arrives at a tournament ground, a broad field bustling with activity under a bright blue sky. Gay-colored tents and pavilions surround the list field, where the jousting will take place, pennants snapping in the breeze, each emblazoned with the coat of arms of a participating knight. The thunder of hoofbeats announces a column of armored knights riding onto the field, with Marshall among them. His armor is unadorned and workmanlike, he has no need for finery. The knights take their places at either end of the list, couching their lances and preparing to charge. A hush falls over the crowd as a herald steps forth to announce the combatants with a trumpet fanfare. Noble ladies wave their favors to their chosen champions, and then, at a signal from the master of ceremonies, the knights spur their horses into a gallop, lances lowered into place as they hurtle towards each other. Sunlight glints off their armor as they collide in a titanic crash, lances shattering in explosions of splinters. A knight tumbles from his saddle, armor clanging as he hits the ground, but Marshall expertly keeps his seat, guiding his steed to the end of the list. Squires scurry to provide him with a fresh lance, and he wheels about, readying himself for the next pass. This display of skill and bravery is what has won Marshall such renown on the tournament fields of Europe. As the day wears on, he bests challenger after challenger, the crowd applauding his gallantry and prowess. Some onlookers even dash out to scoop up pieces of his shattered lances as souvenirs. By the end of the tournament, Marshall is declared the champion, dipping his lance to the noble lord hosting the event as the crowd cheers. With a string of tournament victories and a reputation for honesty and loyalty, William Marshall caught the eye of powerful patrons. He would go on to serve as a household knight for Eleanor of Aquitaine and tournament captain for her son, Henry the young king. Even while serving the Plantagenet royal family, Marshall found time to compete in tournaments. In 1177, he journeyed to Paris for a grand tournament, a melee hosted by the French crown. After handily defeating all comers, Marshall was set to face off against the king's kinsman. However, the opponent's lackluster skill was no match for him, and the crowds began to jeer and heckle the hapless French knight. Seeking to salvage his kinsman's dignity, the king begged Marshall to throw the match. True to his reputation for loyalty, Marshall dutifully took a dive, allowing himself to be flung from his horse. The French knight saved face, but the crowd was not fooled. Marshall's chivalry and honor only burnished his legend. He continued to serve as a tutor in chivalry to Henry the young king and earned fame defending Henry's claim to the throne in the Great Rebellion of 1173. Marshall's tournament exploits were just the beginning of his story, as his integrity and battle prowess eventually led him to become a respected statesman, regent, and advisor to no less than 5 English kings. But those tales are for another time. As the shadows lengthen over the tournament ground, the day's final match comes to an end. The crowds begin to disperse back to their pavilions, and knights retire to their tents, helped out of their armor by their squires. Blacksmiths begin the task of hammering dents out of helms and breastplates by firelight. The tournament has been a rousing spectacle, a welcome jolt of excitement for commoners and nobles alike in a time when warfare was grim and all too common. The tournament allowed knights to test their skills in a more controlled environment, a chance for glory, fanfare, and gallantry. As night settles in, the revelers seek their beds, yet the glow of the day's excitement lingers, a happy memory to revisit during times of drudgery or hardship. In a medieval world that could often be brutal and harsh, the tournament was a cherished escape into pageantry and sport. But the call of the tournament is only one of many tantalizing amusements drawing us onward. The flicker of the Renaissance is still a distant glow on the horizon, and there are centuries of medieval entertainments yet to explore, each a window into the dreams and pastimes of a long-gone world. Our journey through the Middle Ages continues, but for now, with the candles guttering low and the velvet night wrapping us in its embrace, it surely is time for these weary old bones to seek the comfort of bed and pillow. More wild medieval tales await us tomorrow, so I bid you good night, gentle listener. May your slumber be easy and your dreams sweet, untainted by the clang and clamor of the tournament field. Rest now, and on the morrow, our quest for medieval merriment shall resume with renewed vigor. As we explore the harsh and often short lives of medieval peasants, we find that entertainment provided a rare respite from backbreaking toil and the ever-present specter of disease, famine, and violence. While the nobility had the leisure and wealth to indulge in more refined and extravagant amusements, even the lowliest serfs found ways to infuse merriment into their meager existence. One of the simplest yet most beloved peasant pastimes was dancing. On feast days and holidays, villagers would gather to perform lively jigs, reels, and circle dances, accompanied by whatever makeshift instruments they could muster: pipes, drums, and fiddles played by itinerant minstrels if they were fortunate. There was little in the way of formal steps or choreography. These dances were free-form expressions of pure joy and communal celebration. For precious moments, the worries of the working world could be forgotten in a whirl of flailing limbs and stomping feet. Another perennially popular diversion was the humble game of bowls, requiring only a relatively flat patch of ground and some rounded stones or wooden balls. Players would take turns tossing their balls, aiming to land them as close as possible to a smaller target ball called the jack or kitty. It was a game enjoyed by young and old alike, men and women, a staple of village greens and taverns across Europe. Speaking of taverns, these establishments were the closest thing most medieval peasants had to an entertainment venue. After a long day in the fields, men would gather to quaff ale, swap stories, sing bawdy songs, and perhaps engage in friendly wagering on dice or card games. Gambling with dice had been popular since ancient Roman times, and the medieval versions weren't much different. Simply toss the dice and hope your number comes up. It may not have been Vegas, but it added an extra thrill to the night's revelry. Of course, peasant fun couldn't hold a candle to the opulent amusements enjoyed by the nobility. Imagine, if you will, the splendor of a grand tournament held by a wealthy lord, knights in gleaming armor astride snorting steeds, vividly colorful banners snapping in the breeze, the thunder of hooves, and the crash of lances as champions vied for glory and riches before a cheering crowd. It was like a blockbuster sporting event and a rock concert rolled into one. Yet even for the nobility, life wasn't all jousts and banquets. In a world where warfare was the order of the day, tournaments served as a way for knights to hone their combat skills. As the saying goes, next to war, there is nothing more like war than a tournament. Training for these mock battles began in childhood, with young pages and squires learning the arts of swordplay, lancing, and horsemanship under the tutelage of veteran knights. One of the most famous of these knights was William Marshall, who rose from humble beginnings to become the greatest tournament champion of his age and a trusted advisor to no less than 5 English kings. Born in 1147 to a minor noble family, William was given to the king as a hostage at just 5 years old, a surety for his father's good behavior. When his father failed to keep his word, the king threatened to have young William catapulted over the castle walls to his death. Fortunately, the king's cruel bluff was never called, and the boy was spared. William was sent to Normandy to receive a proper knightly education, where he excelled in martial arts, quickly making a name for himself on the tournament circuit. His skill with a lance was unmatched. He once managed to kill 3 adversaries in a single blow, impaling one through the chest and driving the splintered lance through his body into the 2 men behind him. But William was more than just a brute in armor. He was also renowned for his honor, chivalry, and loyalty. When King Henry I's sons rebelled against their father, William remained steadfastly by the old king's side. When Henry died a broken man, it was William who personally carried his body to be buried at Fontevraud Abbey. Such fealty did not go unrewarded. William went on to serve Henry's successors with equal distinction, acting as a chief advisor, diplomat, and military commander. By the time of his own death in 1219, he had amassed a vast fortune through tournament winnings and royal land grants. He was even made regent of England on behalf of the child king, Henry. Not bad for a boy who had once been dangled over the edge of a castle by his ankles. However, not every tournament had such lofty political stakes. Many were held simply for the sheer spectacle and sport of it all. The grandest of these extravaganzas could last for days or even weeks, drawing knights and spectators from across Europe. One such event was the tournament at Chalons in 1274, hosted by the Count of Chalons in the French region of Champagne. It was a lavish affair with over 300 knights in attendance, including the cream of European chivalry, such as the dashing Edward, Prince of Wales, later King Edward I of England. What began as a friendly competition soon turned scandalous when Edward's lance struck the Count of Chalons with such force that it knocked him clear off his horse. Enraged, the Count accused the prince of unchivalrous conduct and demanded an apology. Edward, in a fit of youthful bravado, proclaimed, "No Frenchman shall have my submission," and stormed out of the tournament with his entourage in tow. Though the incensed Count vowed revenge, cooler heads eventually prevailed. A truce was brokered, and Edward went on to compete in the tournament, winning accolades for his prowess. However, the incident left a lingering bad taste and soured relations between the English and French courts. Such diplomatic tensions were not uncommon in the world of medieval tournaments. These events weren't merely about athletic glory. They were also a way for nobles to flaunt their wealth, power, and prestige. A well-run tournament could cement a lord's reputation and influence, attracting allies and intimidating rivals. Conversely, a poorly managed or sparsely attended affair could be a humiliating blow to a noble's standing. No one understood this better than Ren of Anjou, the 15th century French duke and king known as the Good for his reputation as a just and enlightened ruler. Ren was a true Renaissance man, an accomplished knight, a patron of the arts, and a master at the game of courtly politics. He knew that a dazzling tournament could be a powerful tool for winning hearts and minds. In 1446, Ren staged a grand tournament at his capital of Nancy, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Dubbed the Pard Beer or a Shepherdess's Dance, it was a whimsical blend of chivalric pageantry and theatrics inspired by the pastoral romance of the Middle Ages. Knights dressed as shepherds and shepherdesses competed not only in jousts but also in poetry contests, song and dance numbers, and even sheep herding trials using real livestock. The event was highly allegorical, representing the virtues of courtly love. The highlight of the tournament was the Part de la Belle, a public relations coup that established Anjou as a center of culture and chivalry. It also solidified René's reputation as a model of kingly virtue, leading his subjects to hail him as a new King Arthur, the once and future king of their dreams. Alas, not every ruler could live up to such lofty ideals. In 1274, a very different monarch mounted the throne of England, Edward I, the same hot-headed prince who had stormed out of the tournament at Chalons all those years ago. Edward was a fierce and canny warrior king, more interested in conquering Wales and Scotland than playing shepherd. He embodied the harsher realities of medieval kingship, where might made right and chivalry was often just a thin veneer over the naked exercise of power. Even Edward recognized the value of a well-staged spectacle. In 1306, he held a massive tournament at Winchester to celebrate the knighting of his son, the future Edward II. Over 500 knights from across Europe attended, making it one of the largest chivalric gatherings of the Middle Ages. The festivities kicked off with a grand procession through the streets of Winchester, led by the guest of honor himself, young Edward, just 22 years old, a dashing figure in gilded armor emblazoned with the 3 lions of England. Behind him rode a glittering cavalcade of knights and nobles, their colorful banners fluttering in the breeze. The tournament grounds, a makeshift village of tents and pavilions, sprang up to accommodate the crowds. Vendors hawked everything from roasted meats to holy relics, while minstrels and acrobats entertained the masses. It was like a state fair and a Super Bowl tailgate party rolled into one. But the real action unfolded on the tournament field. For 3 days, the knights clashed in a dizzying array of martial contests, jousts, melees, mounted combat with swords and maces. The thunder of hooves and the clang of steel echoed across the grounds, whipping spectators into a frenzy. Fortunes and reputations were made and lost on the tilt-yard. One young knight in particular stood out from the pack, the dashing Piers Gaveston, a childhood friend and favorite of Prince Edward. Piers was a skilled jouster and a born showman with a flair for the dramatic both on and off the field. He and Edward made a striking pair to golden boys reigning in their youth and prowess. However, their bond would prove to be a double-edged sword. When Edward II ascended the throne a few years later, he showered Piers with lands, titles, and honors, provoking the ire of other nobles. The arrogant young Gascon was seen as an upstart, a corrupter of the king who needed to be taken down. A peg. In 1312, tensions boiled over. A baronial faction led by Edward's cousin, Thomas of Lancaster, seized Piers and had him beheaded on the grounds of Blacklow Hill. It was a shocking act of lèse majesty, a direct challenge to Edward's royal authority, but it also signaled changing times. The age of chivalry was giving way to the cold calculations of realpolitik. Edward never forgot the loss of his beloved companion. For the rest of his reign, he fought an ultimately losing battle to assert his will over his fractious nobility. In the end, he was deposed by his own wife and son, meeting a grim fate in the dungeons of Berkeley Castle. It was an ignominious end for a king who had once been the brightest star of the tournament circuit. Yet, while the world of chivalry was fading, the grand tournaments of old still lived on in the popular imagination. Nowhere was this more evident than in the elaborate round tables staged by Edward III in the mid-14th century. These events were a conscious throwback to the legendary court of King Arthur, complete with jousting, feasting, and Arthurian-themed pageantry. The most famous of these was held at Windsor Castle in 1344 to celebrate the founding of Edward's new chivalric order, the Order of the Garter. According to legend, the order was inspired by an incident at a ball when Edward's mistress, the Countess of Salisbury, dropped her garter on the dance floor. Gallantly picking it up, Edward tied it around his own leg, declaring "Honi soit, qui mal y pense," roughly translating to "shame on anyone who thinks ill of this." This phrase became the motto of the order, which still exists to this day. However, the Order of the Garter was not just a whimsical creation. It served a strategic purpose. Edward sought to bind England's leading nobles to the crown, creating a corps of loyal knights who could help him project his power at home and abroad. It was a shrewd move, tapping into the lingering prestige and mystique of Arthurian legends. The round tournament at Windsor was a suitably grand affair, with a massive wooden grandstand erected in the shape of a circular castle, complete with towers and battlements bristling with heraldic banners. In the center stood a model of the fabled Round Table itself, around which Edward and his new Garter knights sat, resplendent in blue velvet robes and golden chains. For 5 days, the knights jousted and feasted, reenacting the legendary exploits of Arthur and his court. They even staged a mock siege of the Castle of Maidens, with Edward himself leading the charge to rescue the damsels in distress played by the Queen and her ladies-in-waiting. It was all highly theatrical, a piece of living mythos. However, amidst the pageantry and spectacle, a darker undercurrent loomed. Just a few months earlier, Edward had executed 14 of his own barons for treason, including several involved in the death of Piers Gaveston. The round tournament was, in part, an effort to paper over these divisions, creating a facade of chivalric unity. Yet, the real world could not be kept at bay forever. Even as Edward and his knights played at being Arthur and Lancelot, the Black Death was creeping across Europe, a grim reaper set to claim millions of lives and shatter the old feudal order. The age of chivalry was drawing to a close, and a new, harsher era was dawning. But for a brief, shining moment, the grand tournaments of old brought a touch of Camelot to the muddy fields of medieval England. They were a glorious anachronism, a last hurrah for a dying way of life. While the world they represented may have been deeply flawed, There was something undeniably alluring about their pageantry and romance. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander back to those distant days of yore. Picture the colorful tents and pavilions, the glittering armor and heraldic banners. Hear the thunder of hooves and the roar of the crowd, the twang of lutes and the jingle of bells. Imagine yourself as a knight or lady caught up in the swirl of chivalric intrigue and courtly love. Remember that even in the darkest of times, people have always found ways to come together and celebrate the joys of life, whether through grand tournaments or simple village dances. Our ancestors understood the value of a good party. So let us take a page from their book and find our own ways to make merry and chase away the shadows. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the stuff of legends. Now if we step back from the tiltyard and into the great halls of medieval castles, we find ourselves in the sumptuous world of courtly feasts and banquets. These were not merely meals. They were full-blown sensory extravaganzas designed to showcase the wealth, power, and sophistication of the host. The grandest of these affairs could last for days or even weeks, offering a dizzying array of dishes, entertainments, and distractions. The feast given by King Charles V of France in 1378 to celebrate the Holy Roman Emperor's visit reportedly featured over 50 courses, including delicacies such as roasted peacocks dressed in their own plumage and a pie filled with live birds that burst forth in song when the crust was cut. Even a more modest noble feast was a sight to behold. Picture a great hall decked out in rich tapestries and hangings, with trestle tables groaning under the weight of silver platters and golden goblets. At the head table sits the lord and lady of the castle, surrounded by their most honored guests and retainers. Down the center of the hall stretches a long table flanked by benches for the lesser nobles and gentry, seated in strict order of precedence with the most highborn nearest the lord's table. The salt cellar, a large ornate vessel for holding salt, marks the dividing line between the upper and lower ranks. Being seated below the salt indicated inferior status. As guests take their seats, a procession of servants enters, bearing the first course, perhaps a subtlety or endery, an elaborate, edible sculpture meant to amuse and impress. These grand feasts were not solely for nourishment. They provided a stage for social interaction, political maneuvering, and the display of culinary artistry. The merry entertainments and feasts of the nobles offered a welcome diversion from the hardships of medieval life, but for the majority, the simple joys of seasonal festivals and fairs were often the highlight of the year. These special occasions punctuated the calendar, providing commoners with much-needed breaks from the daily toil and drudgery that defined their lives. Perhaps the most exuberant and raucous of these celebrations was Carnival, a period of indulgence, preceding the austere fasting of Lent. With roots in ancient pagan traditions, Carnival was a time when the normal rules and hierarchies of society were temporarily suspended. For a few fleeting days, the world turned upside down as people donned masks and costumes, parading through the streets in a joyous explosion of music, dancing, and mischief. Carnival reached its height in the grand cities of medieval Europe, where the festivities often lasted weeks, marked by lavish public spectacles and banquets. In the 15th century, the opulent dukes of Burgundy were particularly renowned for their decadent Mardi Gras celebrations, unfolding in their capital of Dijon. Imagine the sights, sounds, and smells that would greet a visitor to Dijon during the peak of Carnival. Minstrels and troubadours filling the air with lively tunes, while acrobats and jugglers performed daring feats to the delight of the crowds. Amidst it all, the tantalizing scent of roasting meats and sweet pastries wafted from numerous stalls, tempting revelers with savory wares. As night fell, the duke's palace would blaze with the light of 1,000 candles as the nobility gathered for a magnificent masked ball. Lords and ladies, their identities concealed behind colorful disguises, twirled and spun to the strains of merry tunes. For one enchanted evening, the cares and burdens of rank and responsibility could be forgotten as all surrendered to the joys of music, dance, and good company. Yet, even as the nobility celebrated in grand style, the common folk found their own ways to revel in the carnival spirit. One of the most popular and enduring traditions was the election of a mock king or lord of misrule to preside over the festivities. This mischievous figure, typically a peasant or lowly cleric, was appointed to lead the people in a playful parody of the official order. In many towns, the Lord of Misrule held court in the local tavern, issuing ridiculous proclamations and demanding that his subjects perform outrageous feats and stunts for his amusement. It was a time when the humble could poke fun at the mighty, with bawdy songs and satirical skits that lampoon the follies and vices of those in power. Another beloved carnival custom was the Feast of Fools, an irreverent celebration in which young choir boys and lowly priests were temporarily elevated to positions of authority within the church. A boy bishop was elected to lead the revelers, conducting absurd mock masses and blessing the congregation with good-natured japes and jokes, while church leaders often tried to suppress these subversive rituals, fearing they would undermine the sanctity of religious life. The common people embraced them wholeheartedly. For a few precious days, the heavy yoke of piety and obedience could be cast aside as the lowly delighted in turning the tables on their betters. Of course, not all medieval festivities were quite so unruly or irreverent. Trade fairs served a more practical purpose, bringing together merchants and craftsmen from far and wide, creating vibrant marketplaces where goods and ideas flowed freely. As we wrap up this exploration of medieval merriment, it's important to remember that while life was often harsh and unforgiving, the spirit of celebration persisted. Whether through grand tournaments, courtly feasts, or simple village dances, the medieval people found ways to infuse joy into their lives, creating memories that would endure through the ages. So, dear listener, as you drift off to sleep tonight, may your dreams be filled with the laughter and revelry of those who came before us. For in every age, the need for joy and connection remains timeless. Good night, and may you awaken refreshed, ready to embrace the adventures that await you. In the light of a new day. In the vibrant tapestry of medieval life, fairs held a significant place as bustling centers of commerce and social interaction. These lively gatherings were not merely opportunities for trade. They represented the economic and social lifeblood of their towns, drawing visitors from far and wide. One of the most famous of these events was the Sturbridge Fair, which took place each September on the banks of the River Cam in Cambridge, England. Established in the 12th century and granted a formal charter by King John in 1211, Sturbridge Fair blossomed into a commercial hub of international importance, luring traders from distant lands, including the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. For 3 weeks each year, the typically tranquil meadows surrounding Cambridge transformed into a vibrant tended city brimming with countless stalls. Here, merchants from Germany, Italy, and Flanders mingled with local farmers and craftsmen, haggling over prices and sealing deals in a plethora of languages and dialects. Beyond mere commerce, Sturbridge Fair served as a vital social gathering, a chance for people to reconnect, share news, and revel in a welcome respite from the often monotonous rhythm of medieval life. Amid serious trade negotiations, there was ample room for laughter, storytelling, and camaraderie. Wandering minstrels and acrobats entertained the fairgoers, and puppet shows and mystery plays brought biblical stories and the lives of saints to life, captivating audiences with their colorful pageantry. As the sun began to set on the fair's final days, weary merchants would pack up their unsold goods, embarking on the long journey home with their purses hopefully a bit heavier and their hearts a bit lighter. For the locals, the end of the fair ushered in a bittersweet moment as the excitement and novelty of the previous weeks gave way to the familiar rhythms of daily life. Yet, the memories of the fair would linger long after the last tent was taken down and the final coin exchanged. During the dark winter months, as people gathered around their hearths, they would reminisce about the wonders they had witnessed, the exotic tales they had heard, and the fleeting friendships they had forged, all while counting the days until the fair returned to bring with it the promise of novelty and companionship. These fairs were more than mere diversions. They were vital reminders of the resilience and joy of the human spirit, a testament to our ability to find happiness and connection even amidst adversity. When we reflect on the pastimes of the Middle Ages, we should not view them solely as quaint historical oddities, but as reflections of our own deep-seated need for community and shared experiences. As we drift off to sleep, our minds filled with visions of colorful carnivals and bustling fairgrounds, we might find ourselves dreaming of a time when life's simple pleasures brought joy to the heart. So, let us raise our imaginary glasses to the lords of misrule, the boy bishops, the minstrels, the merchants, and all those revelers from long ago who understood that even in the darkest of times, there is always room for merriment and mirth. May their joyful spirits continue to inspire us, reminding us to cherish the simple pleasures that make life worth living. As we conclude this whimsical journey through the enchanting world of medieval pastimes, I hope you have enjoyed this exploration as much as I have enjoyed sharing it with you. May your dreams be filled not with the worries of today but with the laughter and joy of a time long past. Until next time, I wish you a fond good night and sweet dreams of carnival kings and fair day wonders. May the coming days bring you happiness, akin to the delights of a medieval festival, and may you find your own moments of revelry and mirth wherever life leads. Now, let us turn our attention to one of the most peculiar yet popular pastimes of the medieval elite, hunting and hawking. For the nobility, the pursuit of wild game was not simply about sustenance. It was an elaborate ritual steeped in symbolism. A successful hunt was a demonstration of masculine prowess, a means for lords to bond with their peers, and a metaphor for the triumph of order over chaos in nature. One remarkable figure in this realm was Mary of Burgundy, born into the powerful House of Valois in 1457. The only child of Charles the Bold, Mary was a spirited and free-spirited tomboy, raised under the influence of her mother Isabella of Bourbon, who instilled in her a passion for hunting. Mary's education was unique for her time, encompassing horsemanship, archery, and falconry skills she excelled in. Her enthusiasm for hunting was so great that it often delayed court meetings, as she preferred to be out in the woods with her beloved birds and dogs. Mary's prize falcons were treated like royalty, adorned with luxurious accoutrements that reflected her noble status. She would often lead hunting parties through the forests of Burgundy, a fierce huntress known for her exceptional skill and daring spirit. However, fate took a tragic turn when, at the young age of 25, Mary suffered a devastating accident while hunting. Her spirited horse Maro tripped, throwing her to the ground, leading to her untimely demise. Mary of Burgundy's death sent shockwaves across Europe, forever altering the political landscape. But her legacy lived on as a symbol of a woman who pursued her passions fiercely, even in a time when such freedoms were rare. In the world of hunting, noble ladies often participated not as hunters but as spectators, cheering on their male counterparts while occasionally keeping their own hawks as decorative accessories. Even clergy members were known to indulge in hunting, much to the dismay of bishops who lamented their neglect of spiritual duties. For the lower classes, hunting was a means to supplement their meager diets, though they faced severe penalties for poaching the king's game. As we reflect on the vivid world of medieval hunting, let us also explore the captivating performances of traveling entertainers that enchanted audiences across Europe. Minstrels, acrobats, jugglers, and animal trainers brought a splash of color and excitement to the lives of both young and old. Among them was Thomas Becket, who began his journey as a common entertainer before rising to prominence as Archbishop of Canterbury. His story is a breathtaking arc that showcases the fluidity of medieval society, where a man's wit and determination could propel him to the highest echelons of power. While Becket's tale is remarkable, it is essential to remember that for every shining star, countless nameless minstrels struggled to make a living. These wandering performers played a vital role in medieval society, serving as purveyors of news and culture. Their ballads and poems offer us glimpses into the lives of ordinary medieval folk, preserving the voices of lovers, soldiers, and rebels long forgotten by history. As we delve deeper into the world of medieval fairs and festivals, we recognize their importance as vital sources of economic activity and social interaction. These boisterous celebrations provided a much-needed respite from the daily grind, allowing people to indulge in revelry and community spirit. The excitement in the air as merchants and entertainers arrived, the tantalizing aromas of food, and the vibrant chaos of the fair created an atmosphere unlike any other. In closing, let us appreciate the enduring ingenuity of the human spirit that shone brightly during these medieval festivities. Even in the face of hardship, our ancestors found ways to celebrate life, infusing their days with laughter and joy. May we carry a piece of that spirit with us, creating moments of connection and delight in our own lives. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the vivid colors and merry melodies of a world long past, but never truly lost.